Yep. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the webinar, and thank you so much for making time to join this event that we are going to discuss about what does it really mean to be AI native in networking and how you can utilize the latest technologies in your own tech stack. So a bit of housekeeping before we start. The Q&A tab is open throughout this webinar. Please feel free to pop your questions, and we will be answering them either in the Q&A tab or we will ask Jimmy to respond to us. Also, this webinar is being recorded, and after the event, we will email you with the recording and all of the assets that's shared throughout the event. So my name is Roham. I'm going to be the host of this event, and I'm a member of DiGiCOR marketing team. Some of you know DiGiCOR, some of you are new to this, and you haven't heard of DiGiCOR before. So DiGiCOR started its journey in 1997 with the goal of becoming a key player in ICT infrastructure in Australia and New Zealand. And our focus has been always on providing core of the digital technologies: server, data storage, workstation, networking, edge computing, and IoT solutions. And our services start from designing the IT infrastructure until deploying the solution and supporting you throughout your journey. So since we started, we've been evolving to meet the ever-changing demands of modern technology, and our commitment to excellence has driven us to bring a lot of amazing partners to our portfolio. And one of those incredible partners that has been a leader in Gartner in many aspects and have been proven its technology in reducing operational cost and improving the usage of technology in the client base is Juniper Networks. Today in this event, we are going to discuss about Mist AI, how it can help your campus networking and how it will improve your data center network as well, with some demo and some demonstration of how the tool works, and you can learn a bit more about Juniper's vision for this technology. Now, let me introduce you to our guest speaker, James Dean, the regional sales manager of Juniper Mist AI. He is a highly experienced professional with more than 20 years of career in the field of networking. And without further ado, I pass to James.
Thanks, Roham, and thanks, everyone. So it's exciting to be here and hopefully for those who haven't seen Mist AI before, to introduce you to it. So as Roham said, I've got about 30 plus years experience in networking and IT. Joined the Juniper Mist team over a year ago. Basically, was approached about the role, but saw how exciting what Mist was doing was, and validated just how good it is, and couldn't refuse the opportunity. So here we are. But there's a few things we want to do today. So we want to take you through a little bit about the acquisition. So you no doubt would have heard around how there's an acquisition between HP and Juniper underway. And then we're going to take you through some slides that talk about the Mist AI proposition and largely sort of help you understand how it's differentiated. And then we'll jump into a quick demo as well. But obviously we're a bit time constrained today, so we'll get through as much as we can. But obviously feel free to reach out to Roham and the team at DiGiCOR so that we can take you through more information. So just to kick us off, I want to start off by talking about the acquisition. So what we like to do is have a very fact-based conversation. So I'm assuming a lot of people will be aware of this, but for those that aren't, there is a very fact-based conversation that we like to hold, which is taking the information that's on the HPE website, or was posted on the HPE website, around the acquisition of Juniper Networks into HPE. So that happened very early in 2024, so January. And what we do is we step through that announcement and just pick up on some really critical points. Sometimes this helps people understand what's going on. Sometimes it allays some questions or some misunderstandings about what the acquisition is and is not. But the first point in the acquisition to point out is that there's a definitive agreement that's been entered into. So the plan is that HPE will acquire the whole of Juniper, and that process is expected to take or is expected to conclude towards the end of this year, so the end of 2024. The interesting part in that first highlighted section there is the purchase price, which was $14 billion. So that represents, which is highlighted here, about a 32% premium on what Juniper Mist was valued from a market capitalization just prior to the announcement of the acquisition. So straight away, that tells us that The acquisition is very much a a value-based proposition, not acquisition of an asset in distress, for want of a better term. So then the thing is to try and understand, if they're paying a 32% premium on what Mist was worth, what's the driver for that? What's the value proposition? And then when we go through the acquisition announcement itself, we see reference in here to the Mist AI and cloud platform, which is exactly what we're going to talk through today. And then we also look at the announcement that talks about the future, right, which is going to enable HPE to offer end-to-end AI native solutions. So that's a really important terminology, AI native, and we're going to talk about that in a minute as well. The next really important part is, kind of acquisitions in the IT space and how successfully they've been done in the past. Part of the announcement is that Rami Rahim, who's the current CEO for Juniper, is going to be leading the combined networking business. So HP and Juniper's networking business come together. Rami's leading all of that. Now, the reason that's really important is because when Juniper acquired Mist in 2019, we have taken that from a really good value proposition on wireless all the way through now to having the switching, the LAN environment, the SD-WAN environment, a cloud-based NAC environment, and we've just announced that that's been extended into the data center switching as well. So largely that's been seen as a poster child for success as far as acquisitions go. It's gone from a $200 million business to $1 billion plus now in that period. So Rami's done it before and he's doing it again. So that's really reassuring and promising for everyone on the Juniper Mist side today. The other big piece of information in there is the amount of interest in Mist has gone through the roof since this acquisition's been announced. It's been a large kind of marketing exercise in itself, and we believe that once the acquisition is completed toward the end of the year, that again with the HPE marketing capability is going to be an even bigger marketing announcement where people get more visibility and understanding of Mist. So Mist here has largely been a challenge for me as an individual to go out and speak to the likes of yourselves and other customers and share the word and take it from the industry's best kept secret to people understanding why we're number one. There's a couple of quick supporting comments in here. John Chambers, ex-CEO of Cisco, came out and endorsed Antonio Neri, who's the HPE CEO, just on his visionary leadership and demonstrating his team's commitment to innovation and growth. That obviously resonated very well with us due to his history. Another comment that came out just after the acquisition was this one in a Forbes article, which was a Forrester statement. And I love these external kind of analysts pointing out how good we are, because Juniper representatives can tell you how great we are. But when you hear it from either our existing customers or from analysts, I think it speaks volumes. So that quote there was about Marvis, which we're going to talk about today. The artificial intelligence is by far the most advanced AI solution in the networking market. That's not a profound statement. No vendor has anything close to it. Those comments are pure gold for us. When we hear that information coming back, it just validates all of this. And I guess when you look at the acquisition and the proposition of the 32% premium, that again is a validation of just how well we've done with Mist and with the AI Ops platform. One more thing that I really wanted to talk about was just sort of accelerating value for customers. And we've had a few customers come back and say, so what's going to happen post-acquisition? Is the Aruba platform going to be retired, or is everything going to become Mist? Both CEOs of the two companies, so Juniper and HPE, have come out and said, this is Antonio's quote here, just so that we're all on the same page, that they're pursuing the acquisition because they believe the combination of HPE and Juniper Networks will radically change the industry network, but not eliminating products from either portfolio, but by creating greater choice in the sector. So there's a lot of sort of uncertainty around, well, what's going to happen with, the Aruba platform. And the other question is, once Mist has been, or Juniper's been acquired by HPE, will I be able to get the AI Ops capability on my Aruba platform shortly after? Another quick history lesson on that is that when we acquired Mist, one of the first things we wanted to do was get our switching platform integrated into the AI Ops capability. That exercise in itself couldn't start until the acquisition was completed. From there, it was a 3-year process. So there's quite a lot of water got to go under the bridge before that becomes a reality. I hope that's sort of touched on a lot of the important parts for people around the acquisition. That sort of covers it. But as I say, reach out to the DiGiCOR reps and get us involved in a conversation if you want to talk more or you feel unsettled or uncomfortable about anything at all. Roham, did you want to post those questions and we'll get into the slide deck?
Yep, it's posted now.
Okay, cool. So really the questions were just an exercise in sort of, before we give you all the answers, just people having a crack. It'd be great if you know the answer. If you don't, have a guess at some of these. And when we go through the slide deck, we'll share the answers as we go through it as well. But just have a go at those on the poll there. Should be on your screen. Okay, I'll let you do that in parallel. So really just to, I suppose, take you through a slide deck, but the aim of the slide deck is really to be able to, okay, got some answers coming through. The aim of the slide deck is to tell you where the Mist AI Ops platform came from and how it's differentiated, right? So the key thing is that AI is a real buzzword in the industry. So when we go through this deck, I hopefully will have achieved the job of you understanding how Mist is quite different from everybody else in the industry. So the thing with Mist is that we start off from a different place, I suppose, in that we believe that in the networking space, every connection counts, right? So then we sort of talk about what we mean by that. And, you can put your own analogies together, but, a 1-hour outage for someone of the likes of Amazon results in a $35 million loss in revenue. When BT do a broadcast of the Olympics and they have an outage, every user watching the 100-meter final, which is obviously one of the biggest things in the Olympics, might not be there, right? We've got local examples of this where NatPlan schools couldn't run NatPlan because the network wasn't performing. It's an even bigger example on the screen with Coppell Independent School, over 13,000 students not being able to take a test. And then something, possibly a little more serious, I guess, is so for Veterans Administration in the US, being able to track and monitor a patient, right? So they have patient elopement. The network not being up for 30 seconds could mean that someone ends up walking out the door and they've lost a patient, right? So huge ramifications. But across all those different sort of examples, it's all about the fact that the experience counts. So what we find with the current networking that we have today, it is very legacy in the way that networks have been managed historically. And I think the example here, sort of to the bottom right, is a really good one. So like we're doing today, we're running a Zoom call. That could very well be a Teams call, a Zoom call, where we're connected and it's working and it's up and running, but the video could be really pixelated, right? So it doesn't mean you're having a good experience. Okay, so being connected doesn't equal a great connection. So that's kind of the basis of where we're coming from with Mist. So what we've said is we need a different approach. We need to get away from the legacy. So with the different approach, you have to start from a very different starting point, which is not trying to understand what's happening from is an infrastructure access point switch router up and is it working? It's more about trying to understand the experience first approach. And there's a number of things that we have to do to get that right. And the first thing we have to do is start off with asking the right questions. So really then what it's about is once we've got those questions, what do? We want to take all of that and we want to embed it into an AI native networking platform. Now, this is a really key point. As I said before, AI is a huge buzzword in the industry. And what we're trying to do is help you and everybody else understand why Mist is different in this space. And so what we are the industry's first and only true AI native networking platform, which is a good statement, but what does that mean? So one really good way of understanding that is to go into ChatGPT and ask the question, what does AI native mean? What it'll tell you is that it refers to a system or a platform, so Mist, that is built with artificial intelligence capabilities integrated from the ground up. Now, that is very different from taking, in the wireless example, taking a wireless LAN controller-based solution, be it cloud or on-prem, and then bolting AI onto it. And we'll talk about kind of why that's very different. The way Mist was created was from a clean sheet of paper from scratch, saying if I wanted to build a modern networking capability, how would I do that? And we didn't have any of the shackles of legacy platforms to worry about. And that has made us fundamentally different in the market into how the network management and experience is managed. So as I said before, the first thing we have to do is ask questions, and it's things like these, right? So does the network meet the needs of all the various stakeholders? Is Roham or someone else connected to a wireless network, but having a good experience? So is he actually able to run the applications that he wants to run? And is the experience he's having better than just being connected? So once we've sort of talked about all of those questions, we then have to lay our native AI ops capability over the top of those questions. Sorry, over the top of the answers to those questions. So the way we're going about that is that we have to start off by collecting the right data. So as a really good example with wireless today, we're collecting over 150 pieces of real-time telemetry data every 1 or 2 seconds and feeding that into the Mist AI Ops platform. That data has been built and designed to be able to be the right inputs to be able to answer those questions, right? So the founder of Mist, Bob Friday, is as a wine lover, has always had an adage that, you know, to make good wine, you must have good grapes. And the analogy is the same, and it applies to AI. If you want to have good AI ops, you have to have good data. So having the right data is absolutely critical. And we've started with a platform with all of the right data to be able to feed into the AI ops platform to deliver the right response. Okay, so our AI ops has now been in operation for over 6-7 years. It's very, very mature with a really high degree of efficacy, but it's able to answer those very intricate questions. And we'll show you in the demo what this all means about what the end user experience is like. The last part to this sort of story about how we're different is that all of this has to be built on the right secure infrastructure. So there's a raft of different things that customers and end users all become beneficiaries of as a result of this. So that platform is 100% API driven. So when you get into the Mist UI and the user interface and use it, there is nothing in there that doesn't have an API. So often questions come from customers to say, hey, if I wanted to be able to integrate to something, or I wanted my two systems to talk, or I wanted to be able to not necessarily log into the UI, but I wanted to be able to do something via a system to system, there's an API for everything. So the answer to that is generically is yes. The other things about the platform, though, is it's obviously secure, but it's highly scalable and highly resilient. So the ability to process all of that telemetry data, if you can imagine globally how much data is going into the platform needs to be able to have the sort of compute power and the scale to be able to manage that at a global level. That is what the cloud-based platform that we've built allows us. Now, the other thing that's really important about this platform is it gives you the sort of experience that you'd see on something like a Netflix. So you don't have a scenario where you log into the Mist UI and you get a banner that says there's an outage for a firmware update, a patch release, a new feature release. That doesn't happen. So the same as when you log into Netflix on Saturday night to watch a movie, there's no banner that says, unfortunately, we're doing an update on the Netflix software. You can't watch a movie right now. It's delivered the same way, right? Microservices architecture underneath everything is what allows us to be always available for that management platform. You never have an outage or a downtime. So that's the infrastructure. Now, developing and building this and giving you the capability all the way from client to cloud. So when we talk about that, think about the wireless network, the switching network, the SD-WAN network, a cloud-based NAC, data center, core switching, all of that capability is integrated into the AI ops capability of Mist. So it's client to cloud. what's the purpose of all of this, right? So who are the beneficiaries? So really there's sort of two categories. There's end users. I'll rip through these slides just in the interest of time. You get the gist of this, right? So various types of end users, they all benefit from having a network and an experience that is better than you would get if you're just monitoring whether an access point or a switch is up. One where an IT department can actually understand that that end user is having a degraded experience, understand what's causing it, and then go and remediate if the AI hasn't already done remediation through radio resource management, things like that. The outcome for end users is significantly different. So that's the first beneficiary. The second beneficiary is the operations team itself. So through a number of things, the AI self-optimizing, but also having the ability to analyze issues that you're having in the network and situations where you've got degraded service, point to root cause analysis, tell you where your problems lie. All of these things are done with a really high degree of efficacy at speed. So it's much, much faster to get to root cause analysis and resolve an issue. The other thing with anyone in a networking background would know about is a term or a phrase called mean time to innocence. Mist also really helps with that, because as soon as it's an application problem, people say the network's the issue. You've now got the ability to go in and have a look at where the problems are and see whether the network is contributing to a problem. And sometimes it isn't, but it lets you go back and say, there's all the data that underpins it. The network is not causing the problem. So here's an answer to one of the questions. So the wired and wireless infrastructure Gartner Magic Quadrant has got Juniper #1, so the leader of leaders in the Gartner Magic Quadrant. This has been the case for the last 3 years. So I saw most of the people said 3, so that was correct. We've been in the Gartner Magic Quadrant as a leader for 4, but we've been the #1 position for the last 3 years running, and the latest one is 2024. You'll also note that the second placed vendor in there is HPE Aruba. So, and we spoke about the acquisition news, right? So it's effectively daylight to third. Now, an interesting observation that #2 would want to buy #1 when potentially you're that close. They also currently have much greater market share than Juniper, yet we're higher even on ability to execute, which is generally measured on market share. That's a really interesting observation, and I think what it does is it starts to help you understand that the AI native platform that Mist has is not the same as what everybody else has got, but for anyone else to get to the position where we are today is a very, very difficult and profound statement for them to sort of make, to say that they're just going to go and build this new platform, such to the point HPE's gone, let's acquire Juniper for the AI Mist platform. The other really interesting observation is indoor location services. So we won't talk too much about it in this presentation, but if you think about scenarios like you want to do digital engagement, so somebody comes into a retail or a hospital or some sort of an environment, and you want some sort of direct engagement on a device to tell someone there's a sale, or to invite someone to do something, or to invite someone to register for something, that sort of engagement, that can be done through Bluetooth technology and application integration on an end user's device. Juniper Mist has an access point with patented technology that takes both of those solutions for indoor location services and wired and wireless infrastructure and merges them together. So if you have a close look at those two magic quadrants, there's only one networking vendor on the left that appears in the top right quadrant on the right for indoor location services, and that's Juniper. So if there's a scenario where you wanted to do blue dot wayfinding or digital engagement and you were looking at wireless, come and have a chat to the Juniper Mist team. So it's a bit of a no-brainer. Moving on, I'll cancel out of this, and then what I'd like to do is just take you through a bit of a demo and show you what Mist looks like in the day of the life of. So Rahim, can you just let me know that you can still see that screen, or do I need to reshare that?
I can see the screen.
Okay, good stuff. Is it large enough for you to read the text that's on there down here?
If you can make it a bit larger, that would be,
no problem.
yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Okay, cool. So there's a couple of different ways to sort of run through this, a day in the life of on Mist. So what we've got here is we've got the Mist UI, the user interface. So we don't have the concept of a wireless LAN controller anymore. There isn't a monolithic piece of software that is doing the function of a wireless LAN controller. What we spoke about was a cloud-based service that is all microservices based, and it is presented here via this user interface. So when I log into here, one way to look at this is on our service levels page, which is what we're looking at here. And this is a demo site, and I'm looking at wireless, and I'm looking at a period of today, and I'm going to change that to the last 7 days and get lots of data in there. So what we can see straight away is sort of what users we've had on the network and anywhere we've had system changes just at a glance. But when I spoke before about having the questions that we've asked and having the right rich telemetry data for the AI to be able to answer those questions, this is what I'm talking about. So if you think about wireless at a site, there are effectively 7 different categories that we're tracking, which all of these things are fundamental to what the end user experience is like. How long is it taking you to connect to a network? Are you successfully connecting? What's your coverage and roaming like? What's throughput like? What's your capacity like? What's the health of the access points like? All of these then have a threshold set, customizable, but this is the one that we've got set at the moment. If they're green, we can straight away tell at a glance that all of the wireless connections on this site are meeting our service level expectations and they're having a pretty good experience. In the scenario where they're not green, it'll be a different color, amber, or it'll be red. So down here is an example for capacity. Now, what I can do is, whether they're green, red, or amber, I can have a look at those items and say, well, what's happening in here? Successful connections is at 73% success, which is not the end of the world, but not terrific. Now I can come over to the right-hand side here and I can have a look at the classifiers for what's making up the 27% of failures that are happening from successful connections. And I can see the breakdown of those failures. And I can see that they're broken down into largely DHCP at 71% and authorization issues at 28%. Now, just keep in mind, no one's actually contacted any IT operations department and said, the network's working, but people aren't having a great experience yet. This is all proactive, just visibility that you've got into the network. So I can then click on this and let's have as an example, use the authorization, and I can see the impact. So how many users are being impacted at that site? So 26%, and how many access points are being impacted? Sometimes you'll see things like, only 3 users are impacted and it's predominantly on a single access point, or is it site-wide? So this starts to paint a bit of a picture. I can then have a look at the timeline for these authorization problems, and I can see when those failed attempts have been happening. And I can also see that in correlation to the connected users, but also in correlation to system changes. So sometimes you'll see there was a system change made and it correlates with an issue, and straight away you start to draw an analogy there. I can have a look at the distribution. So I can have a look at the networks, the access points, the operating systems, device types, and go through all of those categories to see the authorization problems broken down by those things. Now, what you might see is something like, last night, we know we did a Mac OS update on a bunch of devices. This morning, we've got a whole heap of failures. When I have a look at the device types, it's all Mac devices that are having the issue. It's only presented itself today. Perhaps it's got something to do with the devices that had those updates last night. That's the sort of information that lets you just accelerate to get to root cause analysis. I can also have a look at affected items. So this is starting to get a little bit more into the granular detail of it, but I can see a bunch of end user devices here, and I can see what the failure rate is. So I can see here that those top 4 have all had a failure rate of 100%. So they're failing every single time they try and connect on authorization. If I want to, I can also have a look at the location. So the access point that most of those people have been connecting to that have been having the issues are on, assuming you've got all this loaded onto your system with your floor plans and that, which I highly recommend you do, you'll be able to see which access points are experiencing the problem graphically, right, diagrammatically, so that you can actually say, hey, it's the access point up near that part of the office. But just scrolling back here to affected items, what I can do is I can see these and I can pick one of those and say, what's actually happening with that device? And I can click on that end user or that client. and it'll give me a summary. So it will say to me the client's failed 100% of the time, which we knew. We knew it was authorization problems. It's affecting a small number of clients, and it's mainly on the guest Wi-Fi wireless LAN network. What I can then do, though, is over on the right-hand side, I've got the capability to click on this View Insights button. So what that's going to let me do is go from where we were from SLEs, looking at an entire site and understanding what the broader user experience was across all of the users and summarizing that. With a few clicks, we're now all the way down into an individual client and seeing its client level events. And we know that it's having authorization problems, and we can see those in the UI, and I can click on that and I get a bunch of information in here that tells me what access point they're connected to, what their signal strength was like, the network, which we saw before was the guest Wi-Fi network, but you can see a description code in here telling you what Mist believes the problem is, right? So there's a pre-shared key mismatch. So they're probably just typing in either an old pre-shared key or the wrong one, and it just keeps failing. That is a really, really, really quick and easy way to understand an individual within a sea of users that's having a problem, what their issue is. But there's one more thing in here. You'll see there's a little paperclip symbol just here next to authorization failure. When we see a bad event come through on these client events, what Mist has done is it's used ring buffers to say, hey, there's a bad event happening here. What I'll do is I'll take a dynamic packet capture and I'll store it in the platform. Now I can click on this packet capture and download that, and I can open that in Wireshark or whatever. You don't have to, but the amount of times we speak to customers and someone has rung them and said, hey, at about 10 o'clock in the morning on the 23rd of May, I couldn't connect to the network. It lasted half an hour. If I'm a teacher, I couldn't teach. If I'm a knowledge worker, I couldn't do my job properly. It was driving me insane. It's working now, but it wasn't working then. You can go back, have a look at this. Oh yeah, there we go. 23rd of May, 10 a.m., authorization failures. You were typing in the wrong pre-shared key. And if it wasn't that simple, rather than having to send someone to site or try and replicate the issue to understand what's going on and get a packet capture, it's all sitting there in the UI waiting for you. That's like game changing from a management operations perspective. So that's the service level expectations page. Now, what I want to show you next is what we call Marvis. So you saw the statement from Forrester around Juniper's Mist AI is unlike anything else in the market, and that is Marvis is the name for that, right? So if I have a look at Marvis, which is it's a virtual network assistant. So if you can imagine that you've got someone on your operations team that is working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, never has a coffee break, never needs any downtime, never goes to sleep, and is constantly analyzing all of that really rich telemetry data that only we have that's going into the platform and looking for issues on your network, but also time-based anomalies. So anyone who's been in the networking space knows that you can have a whole heap of different alerts and alarms and logs going off left, right, and center. Which ones matter and which ones are actually impacting you that you should pay attention to? Marvis goes through all of that from a time-based anomalies perspective, has a look at all of that data, and has a really high degree of efficacy on what it puts up here into this actions page. So we call this the morning cup of coffee page. So if you're responsible for a network, the first thing you do in the morning is you come into work, you grab your coffee, you jump onto Marvis and you have a look at the actions page, and all things going really well. You've got a big fat 0 in here under actions. Good start to the day. If you don't, Marvis will have told you that you've either got bad cables in the network, which it detects, and all of the stories you hear about this are that if it says you've got a bad cable, you have. A lot of customers have gone, I'll go test. I don't think we can have that many bad cables. You were right. They were all bad cables. Connectivity issues, so authentication failures, DHCP issues, ARP failures, DNS failures. And then at the AP level, it'll tell you whether you've got problems at the access point level. When we spoke about client to cloud, it's also going to tell you whether you've got issues in the LAN environment. So for switching, it'll do things like missing VLANs on the network. Amazingly, that happens all of the time. whether you've got loops in the network, whether you've got ports flapping, things like port stuck. So the AI will do something like, a good example, an IP camera is plugged into a switch port. There's normally a video feed that's running over that switch port all of the time. That's just normal. All of a sudden, there's no video feed. The switch port's up, everything looks normal, but there's no video feed anymore. The AI is smart enough to know that that will be a stuck port, and it'll flag it up here. If you have Juniper switches, you can jump in here and you can actually bounce that switch port. 90% plus of the time, that's all that's needed. And the IP camera video feed starts flowing again. The converse example to that is the IP camera is not delivering a video feed. Someone from the security department has to contact someone in networks to try and work out where this has gone wrong. You can imagine that could be like a day, 2-day, 3-day process without having that video feed from a security perspective, all because no one was able to sort of identify earlier that this was an issue. Pretty standard sort of basic problem. Mist takes that away, right? So the aim is you see a stuck port, you bounce the port, it's already fixed. The security guys might come back and say, hey, we didn't have video on there for half an hour. Do you know what that was? But it's not 3 days. It's fixed really quickly. Root cause analysis, mean time to resolution. WAN edge on the SD-WAN. And then we've also got a full cloud-based network access control. So if you think about running an NPS server on-prem, or you think about a Cisco ICE or an Aruba ClearPass, they're very complicated, they're very costly, they're not cloud-based, they're not SaaS options. If you've got any projects where you're looking at a NAC capability, can just totally encourage you to have a look at the cloud-based NAC. I cannot remember one customer that we've sold Juniper Mist to since Cloud NAC's been available that hasn't bought the Cloud NAC. It's absolutely sells itself. It's incredible. So that's kind of the actions page. Now from here, I can drill down on all of those events and wind up sort of back at that, all the way down to that end user data level or client event data that we were at before. In the interest of time, I would like to show you this little guy down the bottom right. I'm assuming you can see that one, Raham. So that's the symbol for Marvis. Marvis has a virtual network assistant conversational interface, but it's a natural language conversational interface. So one of the things about the Mist UI is you can get away from having to run command line interface stuff and log into switches and SD-WAN devices and access points and configure things on the command line. You can do everything from zero-touch provisioning, creating templates, doing all of the ongoing management, engaging with support if you want to log a trouble ticket, all of that diagnosis, everything's done in the Mist UI. And as I said before, it's 100% API driven. One of the things you can do is you can use the conversational interface. Now, there's a few ways to do this. I can do this from the Mist UI, and I can log in and just ask it a basic question. So I can say, show me unhappy users. I should do a typo because it will still work. But what Marvis will do is it will go away and it will have a look at all of the information that it's got, and it'll say, here's 2 users that are having some issues with Wi-Fi. And it's automatically picked the day and the time slot. Now, I could have said over the last 7 days and been more instructional, but you'll notice there was no specific vendor command line or language used in any of that. And as I said before, you can actually have a typo in there and it more often than not will still know what you mean. But I can then click on this client. So I can say, well, that client, I want to know more about that client that's having an issue. And I can see that that client has got some interference issues with wireless, but they've been having DHCP errors. And then I can click on that and I can get some summary information, right? So it's most of the issues on that client, 100% of the time, and that's the network that they're connecting to. Now I can click on the timeline and see when they were being impacted. I can have a look at the scope of impact. That's normally more relevant if I'm looking at a network-based, like an access point having a problem. Who are all of the users that are being impacted? As we're looking at one user, it's not going to mean a whole lot. It's going to say the impact is this user. I can click on recommendations, and it'll give you some very basic recommendations around what you might like to look at. But what I can do is I can click on this Client Insights button, and that takes me back into that Client Insights view for an individual user which shows me all of that user's client events. So I can see all those DHCP timeout events. The other way to interface with Marvis, that conversational interface, is you can enable that as an app in Teams. So if you're running Teams in your organization and you wanted to enable some people to be a pseudo level 1 IT person, you could give them access to this in Teams. So they open Teams, they open Marvis, and they go, hey, Marvis, is anyone having wireless issues? Have I got any network problems? Marvis comes back and says, yes, that client's having an issue. And he's, you can see all of that, what we just saw then on this tile over here in Teams without actually having to log into the UI. That could then be an escalation point for someone to say, okay, there is a problem. Marvis can see an issue, give that to the IT team. But they can get into a bit more sort of self-help. So that's kind of it from a Marvis and a service level expectations page. The other thing that we've got though, so some of the newer stuff around Marvis is what we call Marvis Minis. So this is just released like a few months ago. Now, what's happening here is when we talked about getting that really rich telemetry data and the AI analyzing all of that and then seeing what's going wrong in the network, that's all good if someone is connecting to the network or something is connecting to the network to generate the telemetry data for the AI to be able to look at. But if you had a scenario, and I'll give you an example, 2 o'clock in the morning, you've got a DHCP server that stops functioning. Now, if there's no one trying to access that, no devices trying to access that DHCP server, there's no AI to tell you it's broken, there's no alerts or alarms going off, it's just not going to be picked up until people turn up to the office at, say, 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning, try and use the network. And then all of a sudden, Marvis is going to say, hey, that DHCP server's got a problem. What we're doing now with Marvis Minis is what we call a digital experience twin. So it will go and replicate the traffic of an end user from within an access point back in towards the network. So it'll do things like you can see on the screen there, it'll test DHCP, ARP, DNS, and applications. So from the access point, are all of those fundamental networking functions all working correctly? And if they're not, then it'll get bubbled up into that actions page to say, hey, even though no one was trying to use these things, when people try and connect, they're going to be a problem. So it'll tell you proactively. As I said, that's just been released recently, but it's a zero touch. You don't have to do anything. As long as the access points are on one of the later versions of firmware, the Marvis Minis just automatically starts happening, and it'll do a test periodically, so on the hour, from an access point to that infrastructure. Now, when it detects a problem, the AI says, I'm going to try and work out how broad the issue is or what the blast radius is. I'm going to do some more testing on that. Then I'm going to see if it impacts just that access point, an entire site, etc. Once it's worked all of that out, as I said, it'll bubble it up into that actions page to say you've got a problem. That's the next generation of taking that really rich telemetry data, but making it 100% proactive. The other integration that we've got, which is really exciting, is so for Teams and Zoom, if you've got Teams or Zoom as your corporate platform for meetings, you can now do an integration between those platforms. So what we will do is within Mist, we will take the Teams telemetry data from their platform into Mist, and we will show you that within the Teams platform. So you can do things like show me Teams calls last 7 days. Oh, there's a typo. Let's see if it works. There you go. It worked. The demo gods are on my side. But you can see here, this site has some users that are doing Teams calls. And it's saying here that here's a list of the top users for Teams calls. I can see all of those clients in there. So there's a couple extras if I want to go to the next page. But you can from here, you can click on those and do some diagnosis and have a look at them. So I just clicked on the Apple one and it said I'm going to troubleshoot the Teams application for this end user for Apple. And it can see there's been 3 calls. That's been a good one. These ones not so good. Now, if I click on those and troubleshoot that Teams call, I can actually see that the wireless has been a problem for them. and then there's an access point that's running on low power. The other thing I can do is I can click on the actual end user, and I can get back into that client insights information, and I can see all of those client events. But if I scroll down, I start to get this meeting insight data, and I can see for the call that we were diagnosing, I can see the Teams call that was had, the date that it was had, how long the start and finish, the duration, but I can see the audio, video, and screen quality metrics and the user feedback. So, you finish a Teams call and it goes thumbs up, thumbs down, that stuff gets passed through. What we're announcing very, very soon for Teams that we've already got for Zoom is Shapley analysis. So what that's going to do is that's going to say, in the scenario where I've had a bad Teams call, it's going to look at the corroborating factors from the network and say that the wireless was most likely causing that issue because the person was bad roaming or had bad coverage, and that's next. But what we found is a massive level of excitement from customers already just with this, for the scenario when someone says, hey, I've been having Teams calls and it's been no good. And straight away, you can see that they've had a Teams call and it correlates with what's in here. Zoom, we've already got that Shapley analysis, which is great. And that's coming very, very soon, as I said, for Teams. The one last thing, I think we've got a little bit more time, Roham, if I just show one more thing.
Yeah, we have a couple of questions.
Yeah, sorry, go.
Let's finish the presentation, then I'll get to the question.
Yeah, cool. So just one more. I'm only going to touch on this as well, but I mentioned before about a cloud-based NAC. So if you're running an on-prem Radius and you want to do certificate-based authentication or integration with Entra ID for authentication, there is a full SaaS-based capability. Separate sort of presentation can take you through the architecture and everything. But when you're in the Mist UI, it comes up here. So you'll see this column of options here called Access. Now, it's basically built by creating labels. So you create a bunch of labels that mean something to you, but then you put together the policies within here. I'm just going to close that window. And it's the most incredibly straightforward thing to manage. Anyone who's had a go at a ClearPass or an ICE or wants to get off their on-prem Radius deployment, this thing will absolutely knock your socks off. So you basically, through those labels, you're just creating match criteria and then what the assigned policy is. So an example, if I'm a user and I'm coming in on this SSID and I have a certificate and I'm connecting via wireless, then apply this policy. Give me access to this VLAN, put me in that role, I get network access. That policy is literally like an hour and you are configured and up and running and consuming the service. Commercially, really, really attractive. Never need to do any firmware patching update or anything for Cloud NAC ever again. Also never need to do any design for redundancy and high availability that you would have to do for an on-prem solution. The real beauty of this thing today too is if I have a look at this, it's like over the last 7 days, and have a look at the NAC events, I'll see a whole bunch of NAC events in here, and you can see all of the detail that's in here, but I can see this client when they authenticated, and I can click on that client. It will take me back to that screen that you're now familiar with, which shows me all of those client events. This is fantastic because not only has it got all the network telemetry events integrated for that client, the NAC events are also integrated. So I can see in here that the NAC server certificate was validated, the NAC client certificate was validated, and then the client was allowed to connect. And it's got all the information listed in here. And I can see here that there's an auth rule that's been applied when they've been allowed to connect. And I can click on that auth rule and it's highlighted. It takes me back here. So there's a tick there and it's highlighted. And it says that user was allowed to connect based on this policy. Now, if you think of a scenario where someone says, I'm connected to the network, but I don't have access to these resources, straight away you can go in there and say, yes, you were authenticated, you were applied to this policy, have a look at that policy, look at these attributes, and these are grayed out for me because they're worried I'll break something, but you can click on these if you're the admin, and you can see what the configuration is within those and what resources that person's been given access to. You can't access that printer because you're in the wrong group. We'll change you to a different group or apply a different policy. Really, really quick and easy to do. That's it at a very, very quick run through from me, Raham. I hope that's good, but yeah, any questions?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, so we have one question from Yakek. He asked if Marvis is based on one large language model or a small language model or a few of AI agents coordinating together.
Gee, that's a deep question, right? So there's actually Marvis is made up of a lot of different things. What would be really good? I don't have the slide here, but there is a slide that talks about what goes into AI ops and what Marvis consists of. There's machine learning, there's large language models, there's all sorts of AI algorithms, there's a really good overview to show you how complicated it is, way beyond my pay grade. So but honestly, though, if someone's genuinely interested to understand that, reach out to the DiGiCOR team and get us to take you through a bit of a deeper dive session, and we'll get one of the SEs on there, and he'll actually talk you through how all of that is put together for Marvis, because it's quite exciting when you see it all, but it's also there's a lot going on. It's pretty
True.
complicated.
Yeah. We have one more question. So you've been in the industry for a long time. So when a new customer trying to adapt Juniper Mist AI, what would be the first hurdles and barriers they face?
Yeah, to be honest, the biggest issue that we have for customers is that they either haven't heard about Mist, or if they have, they haven't had a good look at it or experienced it. So the biggest thing for us is getting a customer who's familiar with anything else in the industry to try Mist, and really there isn't a barrier. Sometimes you'll get like a small government agency or someone saying, "Oh, I don't know about moving to cloud for my management. Does it meet all of my compliance and regulatory requirements?" We have a templated response to that, and that for me on government and non-government accounts has never failed, and I've never had a question come back to say this bit's no good, right? So there really aren't any barriers per se. The only other thing I would say is one of the challenges we get is that if someone's not ready to do a wireless refresh or a switching refresh or an SD-WAN refresh, they might say to us, I have a problem with wireless in this area, but I'm not ready to do it. And then we always ask to step up to the challenge, try and Mist in that area where wireless is causing you the biggest issues. There's a little bit of a barrier there because they start with an understanding of, well, I'm going to have two solutions. Or if I'm doing an expansion and I don't want to keep investing in the legacy technology, I want to move to Mist, but the legacy stuff that I've got is going to be there for another 2 years. I'm going to have two solutions. There's a cheeky response to that, but it's effectively that you would have two solutions. You'll have the Mist solution, which you'll wish was everywhere, and it will be once the legacy one gets to the right time, and you'll have the legacy one. But the benefit that Mist brings far outweighs any challenges or concerns around having two solutions. Outside of that, there really aren't any barriers. It's literally 100% strike rate once someone puts their hands on it and puts it in their environment and tries it. It sells itself. Really is incredible.
Awesome. One question about the acquisition. They asked, how do you envision the integration of Juniper Network and Aruba would look like? How long would it take for HP to start offering Mist AI?
Yeah, so I think we don't know exactly. So there's a few things obviously we don't know, like what's going to happen with the support teams and how long are they going to be separate support teams before they're integrated and things like that. What we do know from history though is that when we did take that switching platform and the Juniper switching platform after we'd acquired Mist and we wanted to get that into the AI Ops platform, that wasn't something we did lightly or slowly. Juniper were trying to do that as quickly as possible. That exercise couldn't start until the Mist acquisition into Juniper was complete. And from that point, it took 3 years. So if that's indicative, thinking about the Aruba approach going forward, we can't actually have a look at the platform properly until the acquisition's complete to see what sort of telemetry data we're going to get out of it. The platform, I think I can safely say, hasn't been built for AI native from the beginning. So is it going to have the right telemetry data? Our access points today are getting over 150 pieces of rich telemetry data every 1 or 2 seconds for every connection. That's a lot of data. We can only get AI ops out of something as good as the telemetry data that's in there. If it's like the switches, that's going to mean that we're 3.5 years away from taking an Aruba piece of equipment and being able to get the AI ops capability out of it. So I think the biggest message that we talk to customers about is that if you understand the benefits of AI ops and you see the difference here, and I hope you do, you don't have to wait. There's only one place to get it that it's mature and ready to go, right? And that's with Juniper Mist. If you were to wait for Aruba to be somehow integrated into this, that is quite possibly a 3.5 year time span from now.
Awesome, thank you. And my last question is, what role does AI native technology play in ensuring security and compliance within the Mist AI platform?
Yeah, that's a good question. So in the UI, there is a lot of stuff around security, and security is it's a very broad term. So some customers ask us around being able to sort of do that, like deep packet inspection. That function is still more a gateway firewall type function, not on the wireless. So largely when we talk about the Mist AI capability, the really big bang for buck is around the wireless because it's such a complicated environment and the AI just absolutely shines. But from a security perspective, it will do things like detect a rogue access point, detect a honeypot AP in your environment. So there's a panel in there that'll talk about the security capabilities. But it just depends when you say, there's a lot of things that fall under the security banner as to what you're trying to achieve out of it. But yeah, hope that helped answer it.
Perfect, thank you. Thank you so much for this insightful presentation and demo. I don't have any other questions to ask you, so I'm gonna do the closing bit.
Good.
Yeah, we appreciate everyone's attending this event. We will share the recording with you shortly. Please feel free to approach anyone in DiGiCOR to help you set up more in-depth discussion into Mist AI and its application for your company. And we can always bring James to any presentations and do a bit more deep dive based on your account and requirements. If you have any questions after the webinar, please feel free to reach out to me, to James, or anyone else, and we will be more than happy to continue the conversation. Thank you all. I wish you a very wonderful day.
Fantastic. Thanks, everybody. See you, Rohan.